Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Always my joy to be here with all of you. I'm going to start with a poem. It comes out of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, and I thought it was just perfect for today. It's the Volunteer's Creed. Though my troubles and my worries are sometimes all that I can see, still I always remember life's not only about me. Other souls are also hurting, and I know that it's God's plan to reach out to help another, to extend to them my hand. With this purpose as my focus, to be a comfort to a friend, all my troubles and worries seem to fade out in the end. It is one of God's true lessons, how my walk is meant to be. True happiness I find when life's not only about me. And that is the power in we. When we realize that we belong and we're here to love and support one another. So my talk title again is The Power in We. And I think that that's been my theme for this summer. Or maybe it's just where I am realizing the ripple effect that we have on one another. So there's something that is expansive about the power in we. And I'm aware of that divine paradox that, even as a nation, we just recently celebrated the anniversary of our country's independence. But that our independence, both individually and collectively, is reliant on our interdependence. That I can't be independent alone without you, and you can't be independent without me. Even as I came here this morning, I was thinking about all the inventions that made it possible for me to stand in front of you today. Electricity, light, and my coffee maker, and my car, and paved roads. And even just as the fact as a woman that I am standing before you delivering today's message, that there's an infinite number of freedoms that I and we enjoy today because of the ingenuity, the bravery, and the sacrifices that others have made. Think about that spiritual community. I think of even this, Rev BJ and Arlene, just people that I think of automatically. And all of you, and over the ages of the collective heart and that has gone into creating this spiritual community, is all done so through the power of we. So I always like to do what the heck am I talking about? Why I think it's relevant, and I always like to give some tools when I speak on some of the ways that we can put into practice that fifth unity principle. So in unity, we talk about consciousness. And see, we both affect and are affected by the collective consciousness. Charles Fillmore referred to that as race consciousness. Not really sure if he would be using that languaging today. But here's the thing, we're all in this collective cosmic conscious soup together. We're all living on a giant spinning ball that we call planet Earth. And our thoughts and our words and our actions have an effect. We see this so easily in nature. The intrinsic intelligence of our interdependence, the power in we. From the bees that pollinate, to the leaves that fall in the fall, that nurture the soil. We are part of an interrelatedness and an interconnectedness with all of life. We all create our own ripple effect, so to speak, and we all belong to one another. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help each other up. See, we need each other. We really do. I was thinking of the story that Kathy shared of her loved one that is in the midst of passing, and first of all, my deepest condolences to his friends and family. But I think of all that love that is created. I mean, we're here to love one another, and the ripple effect of that, and the legacy of love that we create, that lives longer than a lifetime. That love lasts longer than a lifetime. And that's what we're here to do and be and express. You know, I've always been inspired by the African concept, which is called Ubuntu, which stands for I am because we are. And Desmond Tutu states it this way. He says, one meaning of Ubuntu is correct behavior, but correct in the sense that is defined by a person's relations to other people. Ubuntu refers to behaving well towards others or acting in ways that benefit the community. Such acts could be as simple as helping a stranger in need or much more complex ways of relating to one another. See, we're all wired for connection. And I don't know how many of you, I think I've spoken of this before, but it's a place, have you ever heard of Rat Park? Okay, so it turns out that a lot of ideas behind addiction have been wrong, and that it's not always about the drugs. And there was a psychologist by the name of Bruce Alexander who questioned this in a study using rats. And if you took a rat and isolated it by itself with 2 water bottles, one laced with heroin and the one with just regular water, the rat would choose the laced water. So he did an experiment, and he created a rat park. This is like a Disney for rats. He had plenty of friends and food and colored balls and tin cans and hamster wheels, all the things that rats love. And the results in Rat Park were dramatically different. The lace water was really touched. So addiction has much more to do with the environment and connection than the actual drugs. That we're all seeking connection, even as introverts are seeking that connection, that relatability with one another in the world that we are a part of, and that we collaborate in. You know, and that's the power in we. So why? Why is Amy talking about this now? You know, we can become apathetic and complicit when we don't think things are going to impact us. We forget that we belong to one another. You as a community, in your mission and vision statement, chose oneness as one of something that you value as a community. Now, oneness doesn't mean sameness, yet it honors the divine nature that is intrinsic in us all. Charles Fillmore said that it is the spirit, the law of spirit, that we must be that which we would draw to us. If we would draw to us love, we must be love. Be loving and kind. If we would have peace and harmony in our environment, we must establish them within ourselves. Just like the song says, if you love the world, it will love you back. There's a wonderful nonprofit. It's like, I love, sometimes I think of the technology and everything that's available to us. But there's a wonderful nonprofit that I became aware of, searching for one thing and I found something else. Has anyone ever done that online? And it's called Stand Together. And they've got TED Talks, they've got just a lot of really great things on there for support and help. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to talk to today have come from that. Their North Star is working to move toward a society where everyone has the opportunity to live a life of meaning and succeed by benefiting others. They just get a lot of great books and tools. And one of them I came across was from Todd Rose, and he's the co-founder and president of Populous, which is a Boston-based think tank. And prior to Populous, he was a professor at Harvard University, where he served in the faculty director of Mind, Brain, and Education program. And he's a New York Times bestseller. He says this, which I found interesting. He said, "Progress comes when we invest in people. Everyone has something to offer. We make progress by how we view human potential." He says it's in reality that there's always been a fight between two different views about potential. There's the control view, and in control view, it's deeply rooted in the skepticism that most people are incapable and have very little to offer, and the aim of which becomes we only make progress when a small group of people controls everything. And then there's the other is empowerment view. And that is that we all have dignity and worth, and that everyone has something to contribute, which really sounds like the second unity principle, that we all have that spark of divinity within us. We all have something to, in our authenticity, we all have something to share and something to bring. And thank goodness we're not all exactly alike. We all have different gifts and talents. I think of, there's some people you just don't want making the coffee. Some of it is not our gift, and others it is. Or we all have something to bring to the table. Different areas that light us up and therefore benefit those that are around us. He states that perhaps the most important watershed moment occurred in this fight between the narrow control view and the more empowered view. It happened in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. He states that the Declaration was in its purest form a bet on people, that every individual has something to contribute, and that to actually make progress in ways that benefit the individual but also raise the rest of us up too. Not only was it true, but it was worth making this a foundation on the American experiment. He says the tragedy was that from the very beginning, the principles were not evenly applied. We excluded African Americans, Native Americans, women. It was really pretty much about white landowning men. He says, but our history has been about one steady march of expanding what it means to be we the people, whether it be the abolition of slavery, the inclusion of women's rights, the civil rights movement, increasingly welcoming immigrants. In each case, a few brave souls, often at great risk to themselves, had the moral courage to act. Everything that we hold dear, and really think about this, everything that we hold dear as a country, everything that we hold dear and that we point to with pride and progress has come at the expansion of we. So the power of in we. So how do we do this, right? So of course we do this with our thoughts and actions. We ask ourselves and become aware of what kind of ripple that we're creating. We pray, we meditate. Heart math I've talked about heart math before. And that's really showing being in a place of love and appreciation, and that they've found that there's definitely results of that when people pray and meditate, like crime rates have gone down in towns. So there is something about us coming together collectively in prayer and meditation that can help support the wholeness being revealed in this earth. The healing that can happen. Consider your purchases and how they impact the world around you. Find a refillery. And I found out that there is one in Worcester called the Burncoat Center for Arts and Wellness. Have you guys heard of that? What a great idea, right? It's just making sure that we're changing our carbon blueprint on the earth around us. I watched a talk by Urshad Manji, and she wrote a book entitled Don't Label Me. And it's about how to heal the us versus them divisions that are ripping apart America and much of the world. She states that diversity is not a human construct, it is a fact of life. The question is, are we going to use it to rip society apart, or are we going to deploy it to stitch society together? She said something interesting that made perfect sense to me when I heard it. She said that we humans are born with a portion of our brain that is scanning for threats 5 times a second. And that is why when we encounter someone with a different point of view, that primitive part of our brain is active. That we can feel more stressed and defensive than we need to be. And that in turn is what makes us lash out. Want to prove that we're right. She says that when we label people, etc., like Democrats or Republicans or whatever, it's not the labels that are wrong as much as that people are static. People are changing all the time. They're evolving, and then they're repressing and evolving. That's what brings people together to solve nagging problems, is to recognize it, not exploit it. And she offers a really good skill set that can help us reduce our emotional defenses and turn contentious issues into constructive conversations. Can anyone relate to that? Because it is. It's like as soon as you sense a threat, we automatically, sometimes if we're not aware of it, we shut down, we shut off instead of really listening. So the first thing she says is to breathe. She says, breathe. We tend to breathe shallow when we're in stress, and that deprives our brain of oxygen. So sometimes we just need to take a moment to just pause and breathe. And this I absolutely love. She says, don't merely seek common ground, but proactively create it. She says something like this. Hey, I know that we don't agree about this issue, but I know that you are more than just this issue. Can you remember the same about me? Right? Can you remember the same about me? Before stating where you're coming from, ask a sincere question. Be a leader that doesn't have to be right all the time. Ask, what do you think I'm missing about where you're coming from? What do you think I'm missing? Instead of being like, oh my gosh, are you crazy? Be like, Be curious. That's our power of understanding at work, right? That's using our power of understanding like a verb, to not just assume that we know, but to create an opening. Having asked the question, the next step is to listen. And she points out that there are 2 ways to listen. So really listen up on this one, okay? Because I had to take a look at this myself. She said, you can listen to learn, or you can listen to win. When I have the mindset that I have something to learn, I'm not trying to change your mind. Right? Listen to learn. And to go to the next one, some of you will recognize this. The next phrase is to tell me more. That's from the Eye of the Storm will say that. Tell me more. And that takes a lot of spiritual maturity to be able to be in a place where someone's saying something and be able to be like, tell me more. Because really, like a lot of times when people are complaining, what's behind a complaint is an unmet need. So if we can just take a moment to breathe and not defend and say, tell me more, maybe we can get behind what is behind that unmet need. And really create a loving space for each other. And I'm going to leave you with two quotes, two of my favorite quotes. And this comes from George Bernard Shaw. It says, "This is the true joy in life. Being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations." Yeah. And the next is from Nelson Mandela. He said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedoms of others." And that is the power in we. And now I'm just going to invite you to, we'll go into a time of meditation. So I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. To remove anything from your lap. Like I said, I always like to do something that grounds my body a little bit, whether it's to wiggle my toes, to rub my legs or arms. And I like to put my hand on my heart because that, for me, creates that connection between my head and my heart. And I just invite you to breathe into your heart space. And utilize that power of love that is who you are. You know, love is that divine harmonizer. So we call on that power of love. First, sending love to ourselves, to every organ and cell and tissue of our being. You know, talk about the power of we. Think of all the different things that are going on in your body temple. You know, your lungs that are breathing you, your circulatory system, all of that. And if there's any part of your body that could use some extra attention, just bring some focus and attention to that area of your body now. You know, maybe gently releasing, calling on our power of release. elimination to release any tension from our body, any self-deprecating thoughts. Offering ourselves understanding. Calling on our innate power of wisdom. And faith. And imagination. And then we just expand on that. We expand on that to include our family and our friends and maybe our co-workers. Our spiritual community. All those that are in our immediate orbit, so to speak. Just see that love that you are expanding to include all those, and that power of gratitude and appreciation. For each soul that has touched you in some way. Is there anyone that comes to mind that you might want to have a conversation with and maybe approach it a different way? Can you see yourself as ready to have those conversations where we open our heart and mind to learning more than what we think we already know? And then we expand that even a little further than that. Maybe expanding that bubble, that love, that intentionality, that open-heartedness, that power of understanding to those that we may perceive as not thinking like us, not being like us, that may have a different worldview. Can we call forth that power of love and expand it now? Can we activate that power of understanding to learn more? Can we use our power of will to be willing? Can we be open and receptive to the living spirit of truth? That we are all divine, that we all have that spark of divinity within us, that we all come here with unique gifts and talents and perspectives. And from a loving place of gratitude, can we give thanks for that oneness that brings us together, for the collective light and love that we each shine, that makes us more in each other's presence. For wherever two or more are gathered, mighty in the midst is that energy of the Christ. Can we see that expanding right here and right now as we spend a few more minutes in the silence? And when we're ready, we just, again, wiggle our toes, move around, stretch. We give thanks for, in advance, or give thanks for any wisdom or insight that we have received. We give thanks for one another. For love is fully recognized in the power in we. And so it is. Welcome back.